partners, colleagues, and friends. On behalf of the Parthian Group, I would like to welcome us all to the third edition into more than just an event on the economic calendar. It has become a respected platform where we have investors, policymakers, business leaders come together to discuss what is happening in the economy and how to chart the path going forward. Our theme for today, as you can see, is reforms to
expertise, fresh perspectives, and decade further ado, I would like us to dive into the agenda for today. And there's none better to start than a welcome address from our Group MD. Mr. Olusheye Olushaga is the Group MD and CEO of Parthian Partners Limited, and a prominent innovator in Nigeria's financial services industry. He successfully pioneered the nation's foremost indigenous interdealer brokerage firm and has built the comprehensive Parthian ecosystem, which spans across investment banking, asset management, tech, pensions, and more to come. Watch out. He initially trained as an electronic engineer, and he has held key roles at Lehman Brothers and as head of European credit options and index trading at Citibank London. He holds distinguished degrees from University of Surrey, University of Warwick, Oxford University, and Columbia Business School. Please let's welcome on stage Mr. Olusheye Olushaga.
Good morning, everyone, and apologies once again for the late start. I know it's not me you all came here to see today. I know you came to hear more from Bismarck to tell us about how we're going to all make money next year, and to also hear from Mr. Edeli, who has graciously agreed to join us today, but to talk about the reforms. I know a lot of people in the markets are also curious to challenge him on how CGT is affecting your trades, why you think it shouldn't be done on equities, or the impact it's having on your fixed income transactions. He's here so you can ask him all your questions, and he can probably give you some insight as to why. I think for me, I think the message I have for everyone here today is that we should stop looking at Nigeria in a silos and look at Africa as a continent. Look at advantage of. In all of the discussions, we see a lot of public sector engagement, but almost next to nothing when it comes to private sector engagement. Now, when you go to places like Lomé or Benin Republic, as it were, you would find that they're actually ready to take advantage of AFCFTA from a perspective of industrialization. And I think that that's something that Nigeria, if we're not careful, we're just going to be transferring wealth to those parts of Africa because they're looking at Nigeria as one big market that they're going to have access to. I also feel like from the banking perspective, I think that we all need to wake up and look at it that the world is changing and Nigeria has a role to play. And if we don't play that role, nature abhors a vacuum and people are going to take advantage of that. The government has made a lot of reforms over the last, I would say, 18 months. And a lot of them have been good. They've stabilized the economy. But today, what confronts a lot of us today is security. And investment only follows security. Without security, investment wouldn't follow. But what I do today is to challenge each and every one of us here today to actually take advantage of where we are. The fact that we are Nigerians. Security is not just a job for the government, it's also our own job. And I think that the theme today is very apt. When we're talking about shared prosperity, I think that part of the security issue is that people also don't feel like they are prospering. And the question is, let's think about your neighbors. Let's think about how we can provide jobs. Let's think about how we can raise and lift each one of us up. Let's see how the banking sector can also support that growth, support that lifting up, and see how new businesses and new industries such that we can create more jobs for the emerging youth in Nigeria today. And that, I believe, would also help reduce and alleviate the security issues in Nigeria. So without further ado, I would like to wish us a successful deliberation. Thank you.
I was speaking, one thing that struck out to me was that we need the Nigeria we want, 1A, and each of them in green, some even better. So I can tell you, I'd like to encourage all of us to get our pens.
We say Nigeria's GDP is now $250 billion after rebasing. The aspiration is that Nigeria's GDP should be $1 trillion by 2030. Is that possible? We don't think so. But certain changes are going to drive the economic performance of this country. But if you look at stock market capitalization as a major one, a source of savings, a source of raising capital, and an indication of corporate earnings and performance, then this is something to be happy about. 2, we are going to be looking at interest rate outlook, medium term. So we have the medium term economic framework and the interest rate outlook. Interest rate cannot be divorced from inflation and money supply variables. Today, of course, the central bank 2 days ago surprised everybody by keeping interest rates static. And why did they do that? They did that because of, we keep on talking about inflation being the driver of interest rates. But when we talk about inflation, we always look at it historically, or it was this last year. But in economics, anticipated inflation is more important than historical inflation. So what do you expect, right? People are buying things because of fear that prices will rise, rather than because prices fell last month. So that's, and 24 hours after the Nigerian decision, the Ghanaians dropped their interest rates by 350 basis points yesterday. So, like we said, the difference between Ghana and Nigeria is more than jollof rice or soccer, right? So, why did Ghana do this? Because Ghana has had interest rates drop by 650 basis points this year, added to these 350 basis points. 2 things matter. One, the Ghanaian economy is driven mainly, even though it's diversified, driven mainly by gold. What has happened to the price of gold? It's gone up, and people are anticipating it to $6,000. The Nigerian economy is driven by what? Oil. What's the anticipation of the price of oil? So it's more than jollof rice. It's more like gold and oil. So when we look at interest rates, we think interest rates will decline, but not as sharply as what was seen in Ghana. But also, Ghana had defaulted. Ghana has a program. Ghana has gone through elections. So Ghana doesn't have the high political risk and to exogenous shocks as Nigeria. And the thing, don't forget, Ghana, 1st of March 1957, independence. Nigeria, 1st of October 1960. Ghana, first coup. So Nigeria followed with a coup. Guinea-Bissau, please. So, Ghana came back to democracy. Of course, Ghana had Rawlings, we had civil war. And Ghana went back to democracy, we came back to democracy. Ghana had opposition take over from party in power. We had opposition take over from party in power. So, Ghana seems to lead the way somehow. Okay? So, another thing is the inflation outlook. I just said it. Inflation outlook for 2026 is 12.7, and 2027 is 15.3, and it goes down again to 13.8 in 2028. Why? Money supply growth, which had dropped to 7%, is now up to 10.5%. Not a bit, but the target has been 15%. The price of petrol, PMS, today is 910, while the price of diesel is 1010. Our projection that the price of petrol will go down to 900, and if you use the exchange rate to do it, you find that Nigeria is still selling petrol at about 78 or 80 cents, while in Benin and others it's $1.30. Diesel we expect it to be at 1,000. The exchange rate target last year was 1,500. We think that in 2026, with some luck, we will be at 1,400, and we'll explain that in a minute. Food inflation targeted at 20%, because of insecurity and the bread basket, and core inflation at 20.05. That's the outlook, but again, the outlook is not as important as the judgment. What you do with this is what matters. Exchange rate outlook. Now, CBN intervention, $250 million to support the FX market. The exchange rate is projected to appreciate and over around 1450 to 1500, even if the price of oil, and what we are hearing is that the price of oil could drop to $50 and maybe $45, and we need that as much as a bullet in our heads, but the point is that because of our buffers, we may not suffer that much. So the volatility that will accompany that drop in price of oil may not be as bad as expected, but we have to tell you the truth. External reserves, gross external reserves, $45 billion. Again, don't look at external reserves in isolation, look at it in the context of your debt. Because recently it went up, and oh wow, it went up? Yes, indeed. Why did it go up? Because we issued a euro bond, we borrowed some money and put it into our account, and we said, So that's what happened. Another big idea is remittances. The British government just increased minimum wage, and also the British budget went through. I say this because diaspora remittances are key to the Nigerian economy, and therefore, if you have a minimum wage, if you have AI causing displacement effect in advanced economies, like what we say, last to be hired, first to be fired. That's the story of AI. So who are the last to be hired? The immigrants. Who are the first to be fired? Immigrants. So again, it means that you come back and make your economy work here. And we are beginning to see that return to Jakpakpada, or whatever you call it. So, reduce pressure on the Naira, because the Naira is in alignment with fair value, right? And one other variable we're looking at, total factor productivity, and this is very important. We talk about GDP growth, but the most important thing is potential GDP and real GDP. You see they are equal, and then the growth of capital stock, 5%, that is significant, and investor confidence profile increasing. These are the things that will drive long-term investment views. And when I say investors, I'm not talking about foreign investors. Investors have no nationality, they have no complexion, they have no religion. All they want is money. And it's significant that Warren Buffett wrote his last newsletter a few days ago. Warren Buffett is the best of all times, the Oracle of Omaha. And his rules are very simple. Do not lose money, rule number 1. Rule number 2, do not forget rule number 1. Right? So, okay. And it says when the tide is out is when we know those who are swimming naked. Okay. So, structure of the Nigerian economy. This is what the Nigerian economy looks like today. $250 billion. The most important variable here to us is net exports. That's $24.1 billion. If you play with the exchange rate efficiently, and that increases, it drives every other thing. Today, what we're doing, thanks to Taiwo and others, we are taking money from consumption and we are moving it to government. You see, government is $9.8 billion, but it's not the quantum of government expenditure, but it is the dominance of government expenditure which makes the economy to a large extent inefficient. The other one is $64 billion, which is investment. I just told you that Dangote's refinery alone is over $30 billion. So just imagine that. Add some more things there, and then you see gross capital formation, which goes back to what we talked about total factor productivity. So we think that with a growth of 4%, right, and we want to make this Y into $1 trillion. I don't care what, even if Einstein came to run Nigeria, you're not getting to $1 trillion, right? So, but you shoot for the moon, and even if you lose, you'll be one of the stars. So that's where we are. So these are the sectors that will drive this process. The creative sector, projected earnings, 7.23 trillion naira, and a lot more. There are hidden earnings there. Largest youthful population in Africa, Nigeria's digital creativity and expansion of the internet advertising, technology and fintech. I was at Channels a week ago, and ahead of me, and I thought I had the biggest sponsor in Nigeria, and that was Dangote, who are our sponsors. And they said, no, China said, no, sorry, we have a better sponsor than you. So they'll come before you. And I said, who is that? Say, OPay. I said, wow, what is it? How do you spell OPay? I said, so you will find out soon. If you don't know, you will know, right? So, and I said, Aliko is delicious by Africa. And so what? OPay is where it's happening, right? So that means that the digital bank, the regional bank, the money center, money deposit bank, and all of that, it's all about what share you have of the wallet. We like manufacturing because manufacturing is the one that is more responsive to efficiencies than any other sector. So projected manufacturing, we are talking about 38.25 trillion, right? And real estate and construction, we like that because, again, it's a defensive sector, but also it's a sector that thrives on money laundering, right? And there's a lot of that in Nigeria. Okay, telcos are just that's a wonder kid. And telcos are linked to a large extent with fintechs, and projected earnings 41 trillion naira in 2026 of revenues. Agric and agro-processing is 104, employs a lot of people, but at the same time, it is the bastion of inefficiency. They respond to efficiencies in fertilizer, in seedlings, in processing, in storage. So those are the things that we like. So earnings for selected Nigerian companies. Q1 2026, revenues up 62% to 1.7 trillion. PAT up here 73% to 231 billion. So revenue diversification, we're talking about telcos, MTN. Revenue diversification, data, voice, SMS, digital, element of cost control. Again, if you go back 3 years ago, losses. What were the losses for MTN? Price of diesel, one. MTN was spending 250 million naira a day on diesel, 250 million naira a day. Base stations all over the place, forex translation losses. Fast forward, domesticated all the international debt, sold all the base stations away to IHS and American Towers. And what do you have? You had a lean, mean, and efficient machine. So all of a sudden, and then the federal government agreed for the review of tariffs. So it's a win-win story. It's akin to selling cocaine. So, and now, again, 5G, 4G, and connectivity. And the real condition for having efficient market is communication, easy access, homogeneous products, and the communication is the subject of your device, right? And the efficiency, broadband connectivity. This is good. So Q2, what we have seen, Q1 up 62%, Q2 up, projection is 69% to 2 point, and they've already done a 5 naira interim dividend. And so we are looking at it. And when you look at MTN Group, you find that Nigeria is a fulcrum rather than South Africa. So what do we think that someday somebody is going to come and acquire MTN, one of the big boys, Orange or somebody, who knows? But that's speculation. We like Dangote and the cement industry. This very interesting industry. One, revenues up, projection of revenues up 32% in Q1 and up 28% in Q2. Don't forget it's an election year. So in spite of everything, these guys make money whether there are elections or not. I used to be on the board of an alcohol company, and we say when people are sad, they drink. When they're happy, they drink. When they're happy, they drink, but when they're sad, they drink more. Forget about it. So whichever way you look at it, again, defensive. So clinker exports, but the key thing here is what happens to power supply. The biggest cost element for cement manufacturing is the furnaces. The furnaces depend on power. So if diesel price is coming down, if somebody is going to buy their power stations, what I think will happen is that they will sell all their power stations to the gencos, have a lot of cash, and use that cash to increase their margins and transfer that price. So 10,000 naira a bag of cement is ridiculous. It should be selling at 5,000 or something. So you can see that margin. So we like cement manufacturing because of power efficiency. We like that because it's going to be financial engineering and restructuring of this business and embedded power supply. Okay. Bank stability in 2026. Modest economic growth 3 to 4. Again, this is a sector that is consolidating and fragmenting at the same time. When you see those, that is what's going to drive everything else. So you see government has increased, consumer is flat, and investment is flat because they are waiting for the next election. Next slide, please. What could change our projections? All of these are good projections. But you know, Harold Wilson said 24 hours is a long time in politics. To say, oh, there's genocide, and then all of a sudden markets flip. But, you know, you never say never. What could change up in the price of oil leads to certain amount of vulnerability for the Naira and for the Nigerian economy. Heightened insecurity in the food basket states can lead to higher food inflation. And now you see me, now you don't. We don't. So there will be heightened insecurity, whether you like it or not, because there's a correlation between heightened insecurity and political activity. In the Niger Delta, we know that very well. Increased election spending is so there's about 45 trillion naira of war chest money waiting to be unleashed, right? Either to buy PVCs or to what we call inducement factor. But it has a negative if it becomes counterproductive. Global commodity prices decline sharply. Why? Whether we like it or not, Putin and Zelensky are going to, and Trump are going to agree on something. And that is what's driving the price of oil down. If this happens, most of the prices, you know, today, wheat, rare earth, and all these things are going to change. And that changes the equation completely. Inflation picture. External debt. You see your external debt is growing, and your domestic debt is flatlining. And if you are spending so much on servicing the debt, you have less to do things. But again, the instruments that are going to be issued, the way it's done efficiently, is what makes Parthian and asset managers and interbroker dealers make them happy. They make money when there's more debt. They make more money when debt is. The year ahead edition we just came out. Growth, valuations, debt, and inflation. Next. So, economic worries. So far, America's economy is proving more resilient than many. We exaggerated, but America is going into the lame dog, dead dog syndrome because midterm elections this year. Remember, we said we are in 2026. So we're having that in November. China's opportunity. China is going to face a slowdown, but China has been very, very coy and very strategic. And you can see it all along. We do $28 billion worth of trade with China. We do $6 billion worth of trade with America. Right? But China has not told you about genocide and all that. China are doing everything. They're funding the Road and Belt Initiative. So we have to look out for that. Debt overhang, high debt to GDP ratios. That is the big. Before it was private companies, private banks that had the debt problem. Now it's the governments and the Africa, right? So every revolution, from the Industrial Revolution, Agrarian Revolution, Digital Revolution, Technology Revolution, AI Revolution, has had the effect of increasing by multiples total output, but also has the effect of increasing the difference between the rich and the poor. And because the rich and the poor, that division, that is what makes Karl Marx said that built into capitalism is its own destruction. And that's why Engels said that in the final days, the governments of men will give way to the governments of minds. And it will be unto each according to his needs and from each according to his ability. So watch out for AI, displacement effect on employment. And you can see Warren Buffett has given out all of his money to charity. Bill Gates is doing the same. So he said the only two people that will benefit from the money that you accumulate are two people who don't deserve it. One, the government, and two, your children. So economic worries, negative effect, but some people are paid to worry and some people are paid to hedge against the worries. China's opportunity, we know where we are. We are what we have competition. Cooperate with China, compete with them, that's the American debt overhang. When interest rates are dropping, debt overhang is not too much. But when it turns around again, and if inflation turns around in America, it's a different thing. One thing I didn't mention is that in May this year, there'll be a new Federal Reserve chairman. It's quite clear that December 10, 11, more likely than not that there'll be no reduction in interest rates in the US. So I think basically at the end of the day, what will shape Nigeria in 2026 are the following. Elections, huge spending, debt service down by about 4%, savings of 500 billion, market cap up, Dangote and NNPC listing others, budget of 2026. At this time last year, the budget was based on $75 a barrel. It was based on 2 million barrels a day. It was based on inflation target of 15% and 1,500 naira to the dollar. We got it right with the exchange rate. We got it awfully wrong with the production. We got it awfully wrong with the price of oil. So if I'm to use the same basis and assumptions for the budget for 2026, which should be announced in the next week or two, generally speaking, the budget should be about 15 or 20% lower than what it was last year. But can you announce a budget of that nature in an election year that, oh, you're going to, nobody will buy that. So you've got to do some things more interesting. You've got to play with mirrors, right? Nerves here, right? Well, again, this is the big, nobody believed that any refinery, again, all others lose. Next slide. Moderately, and inflation to remain.
Questions from the audience for.
Good morning, everyone. But I'll technical analysis and the other. However, to see a massive, and lead to a similar situation, how should we approach market? That is question. Nigeria is most. So if you are investing in a selection of asset classes, in recent times, it's not to, give you and dissatisfaction. Should consumers begin to play a role, can structure.
So if you want to port, we determine how efficiency allowed for. That's why you have the consumer protection. But supply situation in the base station, greater connectivity, the quality is natural. I mean, as a matter of fact, the higher the volatility index, the more or cash, and left a quarter. It took 2009. It took almost 2 years for Barclays to say, and the Bank of England, almost 2 years for Barclays to say, and the Bank of England to say no, to Lehman Brothers. And if Lehman Brothers, and if Lehman Brothers did not fail, there's no way Obama could have been president. It was because of the failure that the economic failure led to political change and others. So, but what's happening today? Signature Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, the stress testing of financial institutions makes it almost impossible for there to be bank failure. Before we review the past, we look at the audited numbers. Now they stress test you to see whether you have enough capital to withstand adverse conditions, whether you can declare dividends. So the world has moved on. It took 48 hours for Credit Suisse to be absorbed by UBS, while it took 2 years for Lehman Brothers. Credit Suisse was a year and a half ago. So the world has changed. The regulatory tools are more efficient. The forecasting methods are much more forward-looking. So I don't think that will happen. And is there a bubble? And what do we do? I'm not sure. There is some form of a bubble. So markets will go correction, bear territory, crash. But I don't think a crash is normally, I would say, a one in a century phenomenon. That is 1929 to 2009, right? But you're not going to have that very soon. We had the 1987 crash, right? But that wasn't unemployment increases. Those things don't come together very easily. Normally once in 100 years, 10, which is 100 years exactly. So you look what gets you. Next question, please.
One more question, please.
Experienced specialist.
Airport.
Yes. Why did aviation escape your radar? Unlike what you do, the Federal Executive Council approved about 2 or 3 airports to be concessioned. These are multi-billion naira investments. So why did aviation escape your radar, and what should they be doing differently to prevent this from happening? Number 2, what's our what's in?
Escape my radar. As a matter of fact, on channels 2 days ago, we have found out that domestic airfares have increased by over 150%, while in flying by air. So if you are going, Warri return is now 531,000 naira economy, while Abuja return is about almost 480,000 naira. Why? You are more likely to, or more prone to be kidnapped, right? And you don't want that nightmare. So 1, 2, the aviation industry is by nature unprofitable. May our soul rest in peace. Richard Branson lost his wife a few days ago. Richard Branson said, if you want to be, if you start with $1 billion in aviation and you end up with $1 million, has so many segments. Aviation infrastructure is where the ability. Aviation carrying, the carriers and others. But now, price of oil, jet fuel coming down and all that, we are seeing this. And if you look at the profitability of airlines, they are making more money from cargo than from passenger traffic. And so, most profitable airlines are in Southeast Asia. The most less profitable ones are in the United States. But it's a sector that would drive things. But how many airlines are listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange? One more question, okay. No, wait.
Okay, good morning again, Mr. Wani. I was interested in your slide on the creative economy. And what I wanted to ask was that, do you see that amount coming from within Nigeria or from without Nigeria? And how does that play into the diaspora affinity for the creative economy products? Thank you.
No, the creative industry is not a domestic industry. You see, people watch Nollywood movies anywhere in the world, you see, and it's music, it's theater, it's plays, it's art, it's everything. But the major threat we saw we see in 2026, but difficult to implement, is this 100% tax, which Trump is going to put on movies that are made outside the United States. How you can implement it is a different thing, because I can watch that movie on Netflix, anywhere. So we see a lot of growth there. But the thing about the creative industry is that for every whiz kid, there are 1 million boys in Nigeria who get nothing done, right? So it's skill driven. It's, for every Eze in Arsenal effect, and the entire value chain bankrupt. Because the amount of money they pay to all the people that before the record becomes a chart buster, right, is a lot. There are so many elements in the value chain, so much skill and talent. I don't even understand. I don't even know it. All I know is that, this is what's happening. But we have a lot of talent here, but don't forget it. It's highly concentrated. There are so many aspirants, and they get nothing. Right? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. for that very clear and forward-looking analysis. I'm sure we all look forward to 2026 and all the opportunities that are there for us. Someone said that the best time to plant the tree of shared prosperity was 20 years ago, and the next best time was yesterday. However, well, yesterday and then now, if in case you didn't plant it yesterday. And thankfully, we have speakers in this room that don't just have the seeds for this tree of shared prosperity. They have the water, the fertilizer, everything we need. But before we go into that, I'd like to encourage each and every one of us to download for this program. In that brochure, you would find all the services that the PF Fund and the Dollar Fund. We have a PFA business, so you sweet for us and a lot of growth ahead of us. The good thing about starting a pension business small is that, you don't have what everyone wants. In fact, that's what we do for all our clients. We also have iInvest, where you could make all sorts of investment, not all sorts of investment, all the good investments you need. You could do mutual funds on it, you could do treasury bills, fixed deposits from various. So up next, we'll deepen our conversation with our panelists. Our panelists are some of the brightest minds in the country, and they will take us through the implications. Our moderator is shown across auditing, oil and gas from Babcock universities, and advanced degrees from the University of Stellenbosch and IESC Business School. He's a recognized voice in shaping strategy and development across key Nigerian sectors, and he's currently the Chief Strategy and Development Officer at the Bank of Industry. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Dr. Omagbe Issa Emmanuel.
Couple of months I've been going to Abuja, and then what typically happens is when you go for some of those, so I'd like to start on existing protocols if there was any established in this particular place at this point in time. I think what I'd like to do is just start with, she's a seasoned banking executive with over 36 years of global experience at Citibank across the UK, South Africa, and Nigeria. She became chairperson of the African Economic Discourse. Samalobu holds a BA in accounting and finance from Middlesex University and an MBA from the University of Bradford. Her leadership has earned her multiple recognitions, including Financial Services Leader of the Year to the panel. Okay, I'm sure everyone is always talking about tax. And even in my bank where I work now, we're doing all sort of knowledge sharing sessions so that we'll be sure that we don't fall into any issue with respect to government. I met Mr. Taiwo Oyedele for the first time in person this morning, and I said, it's nice to see you in person. But Mr. Taiwo Oyedele is the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. I'm sure you are very familiar with his face and all this thing. What I like about Mr. Oyedele is his calmness and the fact that he's unruffled in the face of so much agitation. I think he's the man for the job, because if it's me, I probably have broken somebody's head at some point. Taiwo Oyedele is a leading voice and reform advocate on fiscal policy, public finance, and economic governance. He currently serves as chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform set up by Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu with a broad mandate to drive reforms in fiscal governance, revenue transformation, and economic growth facilitation. A former fiscal policy partner and Africa tax leader at PwC, I used to be in Cooper's and Library. Mr. Oyedele has over 2 decades of leadership experience working with governments, multilateral institutions, and global corporations across Africa and beyond. His expertise spans tax policy, leadership development, business strategy, policy finance, and national reform. He's into a lot of things and has got so many awards. And he's the founder and president of Impact Africa Foundation, a non-profit organization focused on social impact and youth empowerment. It just shows you where the love is and why you should trust that he's well-intentioned. Mr. Ayodele, thank you for coming to the panel. Mr. Olufemi Odukoya, very gentle guy. I spoke to him last week for the first time, and I met him in person. He's the managing director of Parthian Pensions Limited. And by the way, when I was coming here, I had to practice how to call this Parthian. So, and I remember that when it's TH, it has to be, so I say it's Parthian Pensions Limited. Mr. Olufemi Odukoya is a seasoned financial executive with over 30 years of leadership experience spanning pensions, banking, insurance, and manufacturing. He's a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICANN, associate member of the Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers, CIS, associate member of the Chartered Institute of Taxation, and a member of the Chartered Institute of Directors. He's widely respected for his excellence in strategy, governance, and people leadership. Before joining Parthian Pensions Limited, he held key control roles while working with Hallmark Bank PLC, Crusader Insurance PLC, among other firms. He later joined Crusader Sterling Pensions Limited and held important roles as executive director in the business development and then operational and IT ultimately. Welcome, Mr. Odukoya. Okay. Reforms to results, powering economic growth for shared prosperity. This session is a 10-day series of Parthian Economic Discourse. So once again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Nigeria is implementing wide-ranging reforms across fiscal, monetary, regulatory, and financial market. The aim is simple, and I'm sure panelists here will speak to them as we go along. More jobs, to turn policy actions into real improvements that people can feel. More jobs, better services, reliable power, improved infrastructure, and opportunities for businesses to grow. How capital markets and infrastructure for energy development. By the end, Nigerians will touch on the policy. Nigerians will touch on the policy and revenue and fund growth should remain central to job creation.
Right. Good
fund growth should remain central to job creation.
Right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to change the questions you want to answer as a result of the tax reform law. Now, if I then ask you why, you're going to struggle to find it. No, what tax? What tax? I want specifics. No, leave corruption out of it. Fixed income market. Okay. No, leave corruption out of it. Fixed income market. Okay, number two. Okay, number two. Because I'll try and explain all those, but you have to get the right knowledge. Because I'll try and explain all those, but you have to get the right knowledge. Otherwise, you must. I landed an agent. So I smiled and I said, right issues. He said it has closed. Now, when you are aware, there's an exemption for against tax. And there are people, one of our committee members bought shares of, bought shares of a few banks. Last times, they lost 1/3 of the money they brought, plus the capital gains. How is that good for the market? It's increasing your profit. Can you bring down the risk in the market? Turn everything to a loss, and there shall be no tax. Isolated gain. To a loss, and there shall be no tax. Isolated gains. So we said to us, so that was how we came up with that idea. Which means whatever gains you have as of can opt. So that was how we came up with that idea. Which means whatever gains you have as of can opt in and out. Tax rate to 0.1. Because you have to ask yourself 30% of 2020 out. Tax rate to 0.1. Because you have to ask yourself 30% of 2025 was over 20. And I said to myself, there are factors. 4 days. Space saying there's a bloodbath. Monday, there was a selling land. All capital gains in Nigeria, FRS doesn't add up. Reduction in their corporate tax, not the case. Because that's good news. We don't really like that companies will get. And the next year, you will get input VAT. That's a big deal. It's worth 3. So my point to you is remove stamp duties on transfer of shares. We've removed minimum tax on turnover and capital. Now, 98, those are the real people. We'll see, you won't notice the increase, right? By the way, if you earn 2 million, but in the UK, we don't understand that concept. We have to make it progressive. It is the only major country in the world where you make the tax rate for corporates. What you find in every country is, I make the top rate for individuals to be high. We did the opposite in Nigeria. We needed to correct that. Part of correcting is bring down corporate tax rate to 25, take the top rate for individuals to 25. At least you begin to solve that problem. Now businesses, if your annual turnover is 100 million or less, from next year is 0% corporate. You pay your news than that. Talk to the government. So we've been intentional about how we're doing this from next year. The VAT from those items. For example, I'll just explain. I know my time is. I'll explain just one. Today, if you buy bread is VAT exempt. What it means is the baker should sell the bread without VAT. But the baker must have incurred VAT in buying the equipment in the bakery, vehicle to distribute the bread, the mobile phone to call the customers, and the airtime. Sugar, one of the inputs, has VAT, right? He bears his VAT. But of course, as a business, you do unto customers as the system does to you. So in calculating the cost of producing a loaf of bread, you add your VAT cost, add your margin, and determine selling price. When you buy bread, you won't see VAT, but there's a hidden VAT in the bread. From January next year, that changes. Bread will no longer be VAT exempt, it will be zero rated. What does that mean? You sell the bread with VAT at 0%. Every amount of VAT you have paid in producing that bread is refunded 100%. And that's huge. So we've done that for food, we've done it for education. If you have friends, family who run schools, whether it's university or kindergarten, from next year, good news for them. Education, 0%, but they have all the input VAT to claim. So the combined impacts of more disposable income and more affordable basic consumption makes life more meaningful. It also means that those of us who are doing business can position ourselves to take advantage of this extra money that will be available to the Nigerian people. I was on the plane to Abuja and I was sitting to a man who has a gaming, lottery, and gambling company in Nigeria. He said, Taiwo, great job that you guys are doing. I said, thank you, sir. He said, that's one of the reasons why he's very happy about the reform is that from next year, these people will have more money and they'll gamble more. Initially, I was sad. And then I said to myself, why should I blame the man? He's just positioning himself. The guys in the stock market could have changed the narrative completely instead of being negative. Do you know that about $60 billion is what our young people put into virtual assets, crypto, stable coins? That is not performing, right? The average age of investors in the capital market is 55 years. Old people like me, the young people are not there. The return on the capital market in dollar terms is around 50%. It has no tax because those guys are not investing $150 million. They're doing $200, $120, and there's no tax. The crypto they are investing in has less gain and is taxable. But what is the message we are telling them? There's 30% in the market. They won't come. So I don't spend all the time for all the panelists alone. The point is, if you take time to understand the reforms, which is why you see me everywhere trying to explain, I know it's hard. People just hear tax reform in their mind. They want to collect more taxes from me. But it's actually the opposite. You should be excited because there's money to be made from next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oedele. I can do a judo for you because me too, I was learning a lot in this short period I've been here. And see, my people perish for lack of knowledge. But I also know that you're doing a lot in terms of trying to really communicate these things. But I don't know how much of it is cascading down. What I hear you say is that, first of all, there's been some level of engagement before now, based on evidence, to try to put some thought into the tax reform. Secondly, there's significant consideration for people at the bottom of the pyramid, and almost like trying to balance the Gini coefficient, people who, and getting people that are in this, most of them are in this room, excluding some of us, to pay more so that we can take care of the people that are under us. So it's actually very insightful, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to now see, Mrs. Samuel Ogbu, how this kind of reform that we're talking about, in terms of sequencing, which specific government actions should come first, such as tax incentives, energy supply improvements, or trade facilitation, to make sure businesses and citizens feel the benefits quickly.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I think I want to start by just commenting that the reforms, generally the macroeconomic reforms, have been incredible for Nigeria. We've seen GDP increase, we've seen current account increase, we've seen the FX rate being stabilized, and the difference between the parallel rate and the official rate really narrowed down to less than 15%. We've seen inflation come down. I think yesterday we learned that it's come down from, the 30s and so on to like 17%. We've seen FX reserves increase 10 times of imports. So everywhere you look, there have been fantastic reforms. But I think the biggest issue, especially today, as we're talking about reforms that are inclusive, is that these reforms have crystallized into 61% of our population being declared multi-dimensionally poor. That is a huge amount that you are leaving on the table. A large number of people who cannot participate in the economy, who will be, they're not only poor, they're also financially excluded. And so these are the people who are more likely to be impacted by food inflation. We talked about, you mentioned that poor people spend money on food, on transport and so on. This group of people we're talking about spend 70% of their earnings on food. And they were the ones that were most impacted by maize and all the primary produce increasing. It was 5 times in their own basket. So we cannot talk about reform and we cannot talk about inclusiveness without there being a safety net, because it means that half of your population cannot participate in all the various opportunities we have. As businesses, we need to make sure that there are people who are empowered to participate in our businesses. So we have 86 million people on the social register, and many of those people need to get some form of social transfer, some form of cash transfer. So if there's anything that's lacking in the reforms, is that we forgot about the large populace, a large amount of our consumers. And I do think that first and foremost, you need to make sure that you empower 60% of our population who do not, who do not participate. I think the next thing after the most vulnerable is power, because you cannot have productivity, you cannot have an economy that each of us have to generate our own power. We all have to, crank up our generators every day. That's just not sustainable. The only people who are benefiting from that are those who sell diesel and who sell generators. So power is an integral part of economic development. There are statistics that say that you can increase your GDP by 1 to 2% just by generating power. And you can also shave off 2 to 5% of your GDP just by not having power. So I think that is critical in terms of sequencing. I know that there have been strides made. The legacy debt of the GENCOs, 27 of them, I believe, are now refinancing their debts of something like 4 trillion naira, which I think is a great thing. And AFC that I'm a part of has been very integral in terms of power projects. Historically, Ugeli project and Kanji were financed. And looking ahead, AFC is very involved in renewable power, and that's critical in a country like Nigeria. We have solar, we're a tropical country, and there's so much natural energy that we have that can be converted. And AFC has been involved in Lekela, generating 1 gigawatt of renewable energy, but this is something that we can do better, I think, in Nigeria. So I think power is the second thing. And, the third thing I think we should be looking at is trade facilitation and reforms around there. I see that, we've been talking about single window coordinating between different government departments, whether it's customs services, FIRS, central bank, and so on. And to just have one-stop shop, because that will reduce delays, reduce costs, and we're still importing a fair amount of our of what we're eating, some of the things, some of the inputs. So, all of those things help in terms of stabilizing price to have a cheaper cost. So that would be my sequencing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Samuel Ogbu. If you follow the trail of thoughts from Mr. Odele's submission about how ultimately there's a lot of benefit that will accrue to most part of the population, and even using the reform to try to tweak behaviors, for example, encouraging formalization, people going into capital market more, the people that are young, and then you now take it to the point where you agree with the fact that these reforms are kind of making, the numbers are showing, but what you are saying is that not much of it is translating down here to the bottom of the pyramid. And I guess maybe one of the things that will be very critical is the need for there to be some kind of serious handover of baton, or the sequence has to be very critical so that people can begin to feel the impact of these initiatives. So emphasizing government actions needed to further enhance the gains is one of the things that may I take away from your submission. To see how these gains or these efforts of government at reforms leading towards shared prosperity take place, how do we translate into the real sector? Can Mr. Odukoya help us explore the way and manner to mobilize long-term domestic capital to power the economy, given the challenges with power, with even reaching out to people at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of how you spread the benefits of these reforms?
Thank you very much, sir. Everyone, let me take a cue from what Mr. Taiwo just said. For pension funds, you are totally tax exempt. So that's the beauty for pensions. That's a lesson all of us must take away from here. Before the monthly income is taxed, your tax contributions will be exempted. So everywhere we go, we try to preach the fact that beyond your RSA, try and also ensure that you do what we call voluntary contributions. It adds up. Ultimately, when you look back to 2004, where we are coming from as an industry, when the scheme was bettered, government then had about 2.4 trillion liability in unpaid benefits to retired government staffs. So fast forward from that time till date, we now have 26 trillion. I was happy when Bismarck was sharing his presentation. And what we saw was that he's projecting that next year we'll have about 30 trillion. So that gives almost about 4 trillion from his projections, 4 trillion mark and move. So what does that do? Everywhere, every place, investments are done using the domestic capital. It's safer. So when all of us saves in our pension funds, what happens, you are able to mobilize domestic capital to facilitate all these investments, even into the energy sector, into power, into infrastructure. So from us, what has PENCOM done also to ensure that happens? In the last 6 months, there have been a flurry of investment regulations. Principal amongst them is the revised regulation on investments. He actually addressed quite a lot of things, expanded the various investment assets that we could invest in. For instance, infrastructure funds, now we are doing 10% for some funds. Now it's been increased to 25% for Fund 1. And they added another set of assets, agricultural investment fund. Very novel, very new. So that gives you the impression that the government itself understands that what will make things happen in the economy has to do with mobilizing capital. All right, so for us, the environment is getting clearer. We have more bankable projects, all right? In terms of regulations too, everybody knows what to do. Okay, the macroeconomic environment is getting stable, it's predictive, you could predict it. So PFAs really don't have any problems with how much and where to invest in as we speak now, because the environment has become more stable and it's predictive. So as we ensure that everyone contributes to that pulse, the funds will be tailored to all these assets to drive long-term economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so what typically happens is, and it's very common in among the fiscal agents, there are many things that are happening in silos. A lot of policies are in place, but not only are they not being implemented, but they're also not really like doing a lot of handshake, and so things don't. We're not able to scale to achieve the desired objective in terms of our national development. What I hear you say is that there are things also happening in that space, and that local capital is being mobilized, and regulation is also inducing it so that people can access capital to be able to do some of these investments that are long-term in nature.
Exactly.
And that is very critical for our development. I'm aware, because I must also mention where I work. I work with AFC. We're looking at long-term money instead of all the time relying on foreign capital to be able to support MSMEs in Nigeria. Okay, so I mean, ladies and gentlemen, what we basically have done is to do an initial discussion around how reforms can lead to results and how that can help us to achieve shared prosperity. We'll go into a second segment very quickly. I think we're doing very well as per time, Ronke, just in case. I've been using that to eye you since, just in case. Oh, okay, so with the second segment, we'll now go back again to Mr. Awedele, the man of the moment, and to ask this question. With rising government revenues, what fiscal choices can deliver shared prosperity through sustained investments in infrastructure, social services, and human capital to ensure that the benefits of growth are broadly felt across all segments of society?
Awesome. I think I remember that you gave me 4 points. I explained 2. I think I should just balance the remaining 2. I explained CGT, PAYE. There was surcharge. So the surcharge is not taking effect from January 1st. And what I say is that I would recommend that we direct our effort towards if and when that surcharge is being collected, how can we ensure that every 1 naira of it goes into road infrastructure? I traveled from Lagos. I decided to drive, and I went to a Kogosi. We're having a retreat with the Sub-National Internal Revenue Service. It took me 6.5 hours to go and 6 hours to come back. It was a nightmare. That should have been like a 3.5 hours journey. Roads are bad. I kept saying to myself, I saw a lot of trucks. So these guys do this every single day, trying to bring produce. How would it not be so expensive when it gets to the urban center? And you can introduce that 5% without impacting on pump prices, right? How many people are the wholesalers? Dangote plus a few guys doing imports. All you need to do is call them. If and when the price per barrel falls, don't bring down the pump price. Adjust it until you can accommodate the 5%. Imagine we are able to spend that money efficiently like we're doing with road infrastructure tax credit, where the likes of Dangote built Apapa Road. We see Lafarge, we see MTN, we see NLNG, right? Private sector efficiency and quality. That is going to be transformative. So you do the 5% without the pump price moving, and then you fix a major problem. So that's what I want to see on the surcharge. The other one was multiple tax. I think it was Bismarck that said that. If you remember, although what many of us remember about the one speech of Mr. President, the subsidy is gone. In that same speech, he spoke about multiplicity of taxes and said we have to address it. He followed up by setting up my committee. By the way, we had a session with journalists. because people say Tinubu and tax. And I said to them, tell me one tax that this president has introduced on the masses. And I offered to give them 100,000 naira. They couldn't find the answers. Journalists who write every day. And that's because there's none. This president has suspended, reversed, repealed the most taxes in Nigeria's history. The first 4 executive orders he signed on the 6th of July 2023 were suspending taxes. They had imposed some carbon taxes on single-use plastic. By now, you'll be paying on those nylon bags that we carry around. Vehicles of 2,000 cc and above. We had the excise tax on telecommunication of 5% that was reversed. We had the cybersecurity levy. It was enacted in 2023 before the... So a long list like that. I'm not even... Because he's not complaining. I'm not complaining on his behalf, right? So the perception is that this man is there to just bring taxes. In the tax laws that have been enacted, many of the taxes have been harmonized if they were federation taxes or federal government taxes. For the subnational, it's a bit more complicated because the powers to impose those taxes and levies are in the Constitution. So what did we do? We sent proposals to the National Assembly to alter the Constitution to take out those nuisance taxes. You see radio levy, TV levy, bicycle taxes, there, even wheelbarrow. And somebody put those things in the Constitution, 4th schedule. So good news, those are bills to amend the Constitution, went through 2nd reading, they went through committee stage, and now they are harmonizing. There is now a plan for them to engage with subnational. If you hear a town hall meeting, please go there and lend your voice. It makes a lot more impact than just complaining alone. But what I'm saying to you is that there's significant progress that I haven't seen before in my adult life in dealing with this multiple taxation. In the meantime, pending when the Constitution is amended, we've drafted a law. We call it tax harmonization law for subnationals to enact. And I can tell you at least 5 state houses of assemblies are already processing these bills to enact them into law. So those are the 2 other ones I remember that I did not address previously. Now to your question about when you make more revenue, by the way, do you know that Nigeria is in a unique position to generate more revenue from tax without creating economic problems, because the private sector is a better allocator of resources. So ordinarily, especially in a country like Nigeria, if you take money from the private sector into the public sector, it's less efficient and less productive. But because we are in a unique position, ours is different at this time. And I'll give you 2 major reasons. Number 1 is Nigeria has huge tax evasion, that these are vulnerable people that Madam spoke about are the one paying the taxes through PAYE. Remember when we launched VADES a few years back, 96% of the income tax revenue was coming from low-income earners. In which part of the world does that even make sense? So if you address issues of evasion, corporates, individuals, whoever they may be, what you do is, instead of currently where we are rewarding bad behavior and penalizing those who are doing their best to pay the taxes, creating a distortion where they can't compete, we're changing that. And then you remove the distortion. The second one is to do with incentives. We have loads of incentives that don't make sense. Not only is government wasting money, we are distorting the economy. Think about the special economic zone. It was set up for people to produce there and compete with the rest of the world. Before we knew it, they were selling into the domestic market, competing with companies here that are paying 30, 40% tax. How are they supposed to survive? Before we knew it, companies in Eric Moss, Rulere, local companies were being designated free zone enterprises. I said, why don't we just declare Nigeria as a free zone? So we just print Naira to spend and see whether that's a better option than having a well-organized tax system. So as part of the work of my committee, even though it's tax that most people know about us, the tax reform is less than 20% of the work we are doing. That's why it was set up as a fiscal policy and tax reform committee. So we have work on spending framework, budget, reform, including alteration of the constitution to address this, priority of spending, and they're going into things like education, health, agriculture, and infrastructure are the priority areas. You know, instead of building an airport, and my friend from the aviation sector was asking about airport. Do you know that the two most expensive airports in the world for taxis and levies are both in Nigeria? Abuja, then Lagos. And one of the major reasons why that is the case, despite our airlines are struggling to even just stay afloat, is because there are about 15 airports that have been built by governors that should not have been built. Many of them can boast of 2 flights a week, and it costs average of 300 million to just maintain those places, which they can't generate. When they hand over to FAN, because it's a safety matter, you must find the money elsewhere. The 2 most viable airports is funding our inefficiency in other places, right? So instead of building an airport because you are arrogant and you want to feel like you are flying to your state capital, there's another airport that's 30 minutes away. You can just fix the road. What if you spend that money to provide access road from farm to market? Changes everything. Schools. Anyway, so we're working on this. We can't go public with how we are appealing and trying to use legal framework to make the politicians spend the money efficiently, because if you call them out, you get the applause from the people, but you will not get any reforms done. And we're more interested in getting the result than the applause. Thank you very much.
Wow. so there's a lot that's being cooked, but just that is yet to be served on our tables for us to see the benefit. And honestly, sometimes in public policy, one of the things that is critical is stakeholder engagement. And there's something you mentioned about people not, when we call for town hall meetings, people not showing up. And I think one of the greatest, I mean, based on my own personal view, is there's very poor citizen advocacy in our environment. Most advocacy is on, and I belong to a lot of WhatsApp groups. Sometimes I just go to clear chat because I don't even know what they're talking about, because they don't have the facts. So I think these facts are coming out, and I'm hearing for the first time, for example, that the work you do, the issue of tax, where you're most maligned in some quarters, is just 20% of the entire work. And I'm hoping that, as these things begin to evolve, and if we're able to cause some level of stability with respect to these initiatives, that we'll begin to see these reforms going into results that can help us to enjoy shared prosperity. What some of the people that you probably want to speak to at this point in time is, based on what you are saying, what you have said, we have seen situations where policies seem to conflict. Because this is more like a fiscal policy initiative, but there's also the monetary policy angle. And there are also regulations that need to be able to drive some of these policies. And ultimately, they're supposed to be the part that also handle execution. How can all these things be, really put together in a manner that citizens can begin to feel the impact of these laudable initiatives that are still being cooked?
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I can illustrate with 3 examples. And the first one is a recent one where there was a 4% levy on all imported goods, and then it was reversed because even though the rationale for it came from a good place to try and make sure that oil that's being refined got a price benefit against what is being imported, but unfortunately what that 4% levy did was increase the cost of PMS and would have the potential of an inflationary impact. So it was soon reversed. And that's something that, had there been consultation around the ecosystem, I suspect that they could have come to a consensus before putting the levy in place and then taking it out. So that's one example. The other one for me, and I started off when I spoke earlier saying that the reforms have been fantastic. Personally, I mean, I ran a bank at a time where the reforms went there, and it was day and night in terms of the reforms that came into play. So they were very well conceived and done. But what I would say is the sequencing of those reforms. On the 29th, we all heard Mr. President, as you said, announce that the subsidy had gone. And then 2 weeks after that, in June, FX unification happened. Now, had it been done the other way around, I think we would be in a different place in terms of the FX rate. Had we started off, first of all, with the unification, but with assured supply. Because we just announced unification, and all the foreign portfolio investors were wondering what was happening. Like, you could have told us this was coming. We would have, we would have said, okay, we're going to bring X amount of billion in to try and make sure that the rate is stabilized. But unfortunately, we did the FX rate afterwards. But so it could have been resequenced to make sure that the supply was there, the FX rate stabilized, and then we took away the subsidy, because then we would have also landed at a different PMS rate as well. So that's something that I think, apart from consultation, sequencing needs to be done. And my third example goes back to something that Cher mentioned, which is something close to my heart, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And this is another example of money we're leaving on the table. There's 1.3 billion people that we can target, and it has the potential to raise GDP by another 450 billion or something. But how do you transport goods when you don't even have rail and road within your country, let alone rail and road and air around the Africa continent? It's well nigh impossible. So we need to find a way for policies to align with our strategic intent, especially something as powerful as the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so aligning our policies and with maybe the agenda of government in a way that will eventually be able to bring about results that will make difference to our lives is one thing that is necessary, and it should be done in a way that trust is engendered and that is properly sequenced so that you don't cause so much harm to Nigerians. Mr. Okoya, with the recapitalization of pension funds underway, and given what Ms. Samuel Obu has just said in terms of providing maybe some level of infrastructure that will take us to Ghana or to other parts of Africa, how do you see pension capital playing a role in the reform to results agenda? And for your industry, what would success look like by the end of 2026?
Okay, thank you very much. So you made mention of reforms that were aligned with federal government initiatives as to improving macroeconomic conditions. So what PENCOM 2 has done, as I earlier mentioned, in the last 6 months, the first thing, one of the things they did was also push for capital increase for PFAs. So they gave some sort of minimum capital for every PFA now to also have broken them down to tier A, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So the figure is 20 billion. Okay, so effective, it was 31st of December 2026 for the effective date, but later on it was moved to 2027 by June ending. So for this purpose, it tells you a lot. The idea is to ensure that PFAs also have enough skills. They have they are able to empower their risk assessments of projects. They are also able to finance long-term projects, develop skills in that area, and also some sort of building public confidence in the PFAs. Not only that, it also has to speak to the global market. Okay, when you when you look at where we came from in 2004, the initial capital then was 250 million. So over the years, they moved the fund, the capital, 500 million, a billion. Then in year 2021, it was changed to 5 billion. And that one has been sustained from that time till date. So what this does is that it gives the PFA more room to even participate actively, even as a player. So what most of us already all understand is PFAs are largely asset managers, really. And that's the truth of the matter. Just that we're not designated as such, but principally we are fund managers. And so as a fund manager, and you drive capital, you mobilize domestic capital. Okay, so the reforms recently brought down by the new DG that speaks specifically to infrastructure just to address what Ms. Ogbu just said. So it speaks directly to infrastructure. Infrastructure was expanded across all the funds from 10% in terms of rating, okay, 10% of your portfolio to 25%. So that tells you the impact it will make going forward. Also, they also included for private equities. Private equities too was increased from 10 to 15%. So encouraging PFAs to say, come, once you see projects that are bankable, projects that are properly credit enhanced, that have been properly de-risked, all right, you could put your funds into these ventures, all right? But at the end of the day, what's at the back of the mind of every PFA is to ensure that we get competitive returns, fair returns for our contributors. The idea is not just to throw the funds out there because we want to achieve some sort of economic. Yes, we will achieve the economic viability, economic support for government, but at the end of the day, is to obtain fair returns for every fund, for every asset you invest in. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is off the script because I'm just taking a cue from what you just said now, and I'm thinking, how? So there's a supply side. We still have over 4 trillion naira in pension this thing, and you have PFAs, and probably many more coming up. Is there? I mean, we're also at a serious deficit in infrastructure. But is there a player? I mean, which vehicles are on the demand side, and how are they targeting their offerings to take care of the gaps that we know exist? That is a problem in terms of the country's economic development.
Okay, I will give you one example. Of recent, I think media, Mofi, Nigerian Real Estate Investment Fund, came up. And if you check all those who subscribed, largely they are PFAs. So they supported that venture because it's properly de-risked. I mean, it's bankable, all the regulatory provisions were met, and so it became bread and butter for a PFA to just invest in. So stuff like that, PFAs will naturally not create those assets naturally, but anyone that has those assets and meets the regulatory standards, they are prescribed in the investment guidelines, purely prescribed. Once you can tick off the box one by one, then it becomes a deal for every PFA.
Thank you. So what I hear Mr. Odukoya say is that in this room here, if you're not thinking about it yet, there are reforms, there are policies, there are asset managers who are in control of over 4 trillion naira in assets,
26 trillion.
26 trillion, sorry, in pension assets, and everybody's aware that there are gaps. So perhaps at this point, it'd be nice to start thinking of coming up with a credible vehicle that can be on the demand side and begin to meet those requirements, so that all of us here can truly, make a difference in terms of value creation, so that this issue of reforms will lead to results, because there are Nigerians who are really driving this thing, and ultimately help to create shared prosperity for all of us. And then we can see that those reforms, regulatory, fiscal, monetary, there are people like us who are now creating the demand side and creating a value for us to make a difference and improve the lot of Nigerians. Thank you very much for your commitment to this session, and thank you panelists for your contribution so far. It's not the end yet. Based on the script, we're supposed to have 4 segments, but we're going to add a 3rd segment. I'm still watching. I can't see the time. That's the problem. Okay. So we are in the 3rd and final segment then, as a result of the time that I'm now seeing. And I would just like to maybe for Mr. Wedele to just speak around maybe the nexus of interest rates and issues around the monetary this thing. How does, given the high interest rate and high debt environment, what fiscal measures can prevent reform efforts from crowding out private investment, especially in power and infrastructure? Again, about power infrastructure. Or more like it, how can these fiscal incentives crowd in private sector in another way? Thank you.
All right.
I did a joke for you in the last, but this one you have 2 minutes based on the warning I'm getting from Ronke.
Okay, just 2 minutes. All right, so I think because Madam was talking about the sequencing, which is a valid point. I said I'm not sure whether the sequencing could have been different from what we had. Do you know that the major problem wasn't the subsidy itself? It was subsidy on PMS. It was the subsidy on FX. And if we had managed our FX well as a country, you would have removed the subsidy on PMS and you'd be paying less than 300 naira per liter. We've mismanaged FX for so long. It created a big problem for us. We found out even from the fiscal side that we have some policies that actually don't make sense. One of it is many Nigerian companies and businesses are asked to pay taxes to the government in foreign currency. Like, in which part of the world does that make sense? When we spoke to the central bank, it was the equivalent of $4 billion a year. You essentially ask your businesses to go to the FX market to go and bid for dollars so they can pay Nigerian government. Add zero liquidity to your FX, but create an avoidable demand against the naira. So we're doing everything to just crash our naira. So those are some of the things we've addressed now in the new tax laws. But I think beyond that, my view around interest rates is always different from the traditional economist. There is this belief, Bismarck is not in the room again, I wish he's here. Economists generally think that the monetary policy rate is the interest rate. It's not the interest rate. So they will tell you it has to be higher than inflation so that the real return can be positive. That's not correct. The real interest rate, if you believe that your inflation was demand pull, is what you get on deposit. That's what the vast majority of your citizens do with their money. They can't even buy treasury bills. Let's even say they are buying treasury bills. It's sub 20% today. Bond, even 10-year bond, sub 20%. How is it that the reference rate is the highest rate? In every economy, you're supposed to add on top of the reference rate. That reference rate now is only acting one purpose: make it harder for each sector to borrow. Those are the guys where you add up to 27 for them to borrow. And my view, based on data, is that our inflation was not because of excess demand or liquidity. It was cost push, and we could tell where they were coming from. Energy costs, FX, right? Manufacturers are operating at lower capacity, yet they have more unsold inventory than any time before. People can't buy. That was why when they increased minimum wage, there was no spike in inflation. So we need to get our data right and use this, our economics theory within context. Otherwise, we create more problems unnecessarily. But to your question, it's just really about how do we align? Because now if inflation is moderating and that benefits everyone, infrastructure spending, interest rate, exchange rate, and we're traveling in the right direction. Once people see that level of stability, Nigeria is going to take a jump in 2026.
Thank you. So what that means is these reforms will build confidence, and with confidence, things will begin to really stabilize, and hopefully we'll begin to experience that prosperity that we expect. Mrs. Samuel Ogbu, looking ahead to the next year or two, Mr. Aribani said that we're already in 2026, in November 2025. So, and most of his forecasts were up to 2028. So I guess this question is also along that line. So looking ahead to the next next year or two, what are 3 concrete things the government could do to consolidate the current economic gains?
Okay. I want to start off by saying I'm really rooting for Mr. Edele and all he's doing. And you'll understand why in a minute, because I think it's fantastic. We as a country have historically raised less than 10% of our GDP as tax collection, while all the countries we laugh at are at 25%. even war-torn countries. So it's really important. The size of our government is minuscule for what we need to do. And one thing I think is hugely important, because the whole world talks about it, that we have this demographic dividend, okay? We're going to be 263 million in year 2030. Now, that's great, okay? But we need to look at that against the backdrop of some of the structural issues we have in our educational system today. The first issue is that we have over 18 million children out of school. 1 in 5 people globally out of school is a Nigerian child. That's the first thing. The second issue is that when they finally go to school and they graduate, 85% of us are digitally illiterate. That's what 2 studies are telling us. So all these people who we can use for the service sector and for outsourcing, you know, do not have the skills to do it. And that's a very concerning statistic. They're functionally literate, but they're digital. And we saw what Bismarck put up in terms of how digitization is happening in Nigeria, how fintech is taking over and so on. Yet we have all of these graduates who are not able to participate in this new digital economy. So back to my starting point. The reason why I'm rooting for you is that we can now raise enough money to deploy to our educational system, which really has been hollowed out over these years. And that, you know, when I don't think people balance it in their mind. All we're thinking about is we have to pay more tax. And that's not actually the case from what you've been saying. We're actually increasing the number of people who pay tax, and you're actually reducing for some. But if we don't pay our taxes, who's going to work in our institutions? Who's going to be the next unicorn? I mean, and we've been able to achieve all these incredible things in Nigeria with producing 85% functionally or digitally illiterate graduates. So I think that that's an important thing. The second point for me is around continuing to diversify our income stream as Nigeria, because we still are too dependent on oil. 90% of our FX is from oil, and it's only 5% of our GDP. Look at all the other businesses that Bismarck put up on the screen. So there really is a need for us to diversify and to look at non-oil sources of income. And I'll end with where I started in terms of making sure that these policies that are being put in place cascade, okay? They need to make sure these policies need to result in tangible benefits for all of us, whether it's education, whether it's inflation, whether it's transportation. It needs to have an impact on the quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Samuel Ogbu. I think, so essentially what is important is for us to be able to ensure that we almost like track the benefits of these various reforms and policies and see how they truly impact our lives. Thank you very much. I think at this point, we'd like to take questions from the audience, after which we'd have closing remarks, 1 minute per person, and then we'll call it a day. Hopefully, we'll be able to make some progress with respect to how reforms lead to results and how we can together share the prosperity of these reforms and the results that accrue. Okay, I'm not the one that is going to, am I the one that's going to call them? All right, so I just do. There was a plenty. So, lady, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Can you please give her a microphone? So just introduce yourself and then try and be concise because we need to manage time.
My name is Okunlola Eunice. I work with Brooks and Blake. Thank you for an insightful session to all the panelists. Something is still worrying that we've not spoken about. The reforms are good. The economies are picking up. But insecurity, I don't see any emphasis being laid on insecurity. How insecurity is going to affect everything that is on ground. Please, can we speak on this? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the panel. I have 2 quick questions, one for the pension fund and one for Mr. Taiwo. To excuse my name, I work for AVPA. the first question is for the the PFA. Are you confirming that the challenge that you see or have, because most people criticize PFAs for just playing safe, is this an opportunity, like a deal source problem, like you were trying to emphasize, or are there more? Is there people say you don't lack opportunity, that you're just risk averse, and that maybe the problem is liquidity and exits? I just need you to reconfirm. Are you saying that it's really deal quality for you, or do you have those two other considerations? For my former financial reporting lecturer, my question to you would be, I see the work in the VAT harmonization. What more can you do around incentivizing productivity with states? And I give one example. So some people in Kebbi, Zamfara, or Kano destroy alcohol every day, but they still share part of VAT revenue from alcohol sold everywhere. Like, I see that there's something you have done there, but like, what more can be done? And if this continues, what is the incentive for productivity? They can still continue to do that. Thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Regina Asala, Rand Merchant Bank. I have two questions, one for Ireti and the other for Mr. Taiwo. You spoke consequencing, and I was really, interested in that. My question is with regards to the capital gain tax. I understand the constraints that the government has with regards to the tenure that they're in and the need to put in those policies early enough. But my question is centered on the timing. We're just recovering from a market where confidence was an issue for the FDIs and the FBIs in terms of free exits because of the limitations of FX. And this confidence is just renewing. I understand that there's a limit to, the tax refers to a particular value that you would have gained within a year or so. But again, is this the right timing? Would it lead to more exits that we intend to, especially for the FDIs and the FBIs, because we know that that's where the big money comes in from. So what's your take on it? Is this the right timing for it? My second question is for Mr. Taiwo, and it's with regards to, I'm a custodian, and there have been a lot of uproar with regards to not what should be taxed in regards to the withholding tax on Treasury bill, but how, who, and when are we going to go through retrospect to 2022 January 1st or going forward? There are a lot of gray areas. We've had a lot of responses because a lot of banks have, due to the 28th of October publication, a lot of banks have embarked on it where others haven't. And there's been a lot of uproar and responses from clients. So the question is, when are we going to have a clear-cut process on how this is going to be executed? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll take these three questions for now, and then, so I don't know whether I use my street sense to answer your question on insecurity. When Mr. Rewani spoke, and especially around the aviation issue, he actually spoke about aviation. I should talk about insecurity, and I'm trying to wonder what to say about it, because if you have airports in places that you don't have 2 flights in a day, and you can fly to an airport and take 30 minutes as governor to go to your state, but within 30 minutes anything can happen. So perhaps that explains why they want to build their own airport, so that they just fly from point to point and there'll be no concerns. So I think the issue of insecurity is a big elephant in the room, and I'm not sure that around these particular conversations we're able to deal with it extensively that will satisfy you. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to the matter. Yeah.
So I'm clearly not a security expert. But one thing I can tell you is that I do think that what's happening now is actually good for the country. So there is a level of attention we've never paid to insecurity before. And there's so much pressure on the political leadership to do something differently. If you watched the National Assembly yesterday, I haven't seen that level of concern, real concern before. Yes, I haven't seen that level of real concern before. You know, combined with the president saying withdraw police from VIPs, they see the personal threat to themselves. Yeah, the reality is whatever it is, they're going to make people who need to do the right thing to do the right thing. The National Assembly was asking the question, who gave the order to withdraw the army before they overlook it, right? Because they don't want to step on toes. You know, I honestly think, you know, I didn't like the tweet from Mr. Trump, right? He really was condescending. We're a shithole country now, we're a disgraced country. You're not supposed to do that to a whole country if you want to help them. But if you push that aside, I watched the whole hearing at Congress. I was impressed. These were guys thousands of kilometers away, and they were speaking to data. You may not agree with all the analysis. And I was saying to myself, why is that not happening in Abuja, 3-arm zone? So I honestly think that now we're going to tackle it. And once we tackle it, one of the Congress person, I can't remember whether it's a woman or man, who made a contribution was, I think a woman, she said, even these terrorists we are talking about are not even sophisticated. Like, no drones, no tunnel, they can't even plan well. Like, you're supposed to be able to handle these guys in a few days, you know? Anyway, I'll leave it at that, because like I said, I'm not a security expert. There's also the part of the tax reform that will help with insecurity. I won't go into the details. One of the things that I said in one of my engagements that went viral was the fact that I said sex workers will pay tax. And you know the people that made it go viral? They were men. They said, you are increasing how much we need to pay. But that aside, the underlying principle, and it's not a new thing because of the new tax reform, it's always been there. Low level of awareness in tax in Nigeria is unimaginable. People are just finding out things for the first time that has been there since independence. One of the reasons why all over the world, the tax laws does not respect morality, immorality, legality, and illegality is because it's one of the best ways to fight crime. All crimes. In the US, the IRS, you find on their website, if you steal anything, you have an obligation to disclose it for tax purposes. And I'm not joking, at fair value, unless you have returned it to the rightful owner in the same year of assessment. In 1927, there was a criminal that was, evading tax because it's hard to disclose what you have stolen. When they find you, to establish that you stole anything can take 10 years. In Nigeria, it can take 20 years. It takes less than 24 hours to establish that you have not paid the tax. Silvio Berlusconi was so powerful, they couldn't pin him down until they brought tax into it. So this tax thing is the best weapon against crime. I'll leave it at that. So Toshukwu says, how are we incentivizing productivity with states? Some of them destroy alcohol, they still share the VAT. You remember this was the biggest thing we needed to fight. And this was the reason why we said, VAT is a consumption tax. Why don't you share based on what you contribute in terms of consumption? And this wouldn't have mattered anymore. You destroy it, your contribution to consumption comes down. But then it was all political. It's against the North, it's this and that, Lagos. At the end of the day, we have to respect ourselves. Because I quickly realized I didn't know how powerful the governors were until that thing happened. Without them, there will be no tax reform. So we needed to do everything to bring them on board. So when they were giving us instruction, we're just saying, Your Excellency, thank you. So the last one, but I'll say there was a bit of progress. They didn't take our 60%, they moved it to 30%. That's progress. Maybe we also need to be a bit more, conservative about our expectations. What we're planning to do now, many of you will know about the electronic invoicing. By the end of 2026, we'll have real data to go and show them why this is in the benefit and interest of everyone. The last question is from Regina, who says, the timing of the CGT, isn't that a problem? And my view is that the best time to do it is actually now, because it's better. The 30% from 1st of January next year is better than the 10% you have now. That's what I've been trying to explain. The 10% you have now has a very high risk to it where you can pay on losses. You can pay more than 100% of your gain. Under this new one from January, the maximum you would ever pay is that 30, which is coming down to 25. So that's good for investment. It brings down your risk. In addition to that, the FPI portfolio, even though it is not targeted at them, right, exited in 2022. They started coming back. As we speak today, as at the end of October, we have about 2 trillion naira in the capital market. So the FPIs are a little over 2%. Now that they're coming back, is the time to attract them even more. There's no data anywhere in the world that shows that countries that have no capital gains attract more investment into their capital market. And that's because tax, in whatever way or form, is only an input into how you determine where to invest, which is essentially, I have stocks in the US capital markets. They do withholding tax of 30% on dividend. I'm always angry when I see my statements, right? Would I stop investing in the US? Of course not. If you can make returns of 50% and you pay tax of 20-25%, you are better than going to a country where there's no CGT, but you lose your money. So all the fundamentals with what we're giving to companies means that from next year, the capital market will be amazing. The time to invest is now. For the top people that are paying more taxes, my advice, I know there are a lot of CEOs in the room, you need to increase their pay, because what we're giving to companies altogether next year is about 5 trillion naira. The estimate for this top-up rate for personal income tax is less than 500 billion. So if my company would make 10 billion benefits, and these my staff, top staff, will pay 100 million, why don't I just top it up for them so everybody is happy? And of course, your younger staff, middle class, low-income earners, they will love you from next year. Make sure you implement too, because some people are so angry now, they won't even implement the exemption. So we don't think that we spent a lot of time, even yesterday I was still with these foreign investors, trying to take their questions and clarify. And your other question is, withholding tax on T-bills, what's it and when are we going to clarify? So there was an exemption order in 2011 for 10 years. It expired in 2021. Effective from 1st January 2022, we're supposed to all be deducting withholding tax on T-bills, homo bills, corporate bond. We did not. Which is why I say Nigeria is one country where people just believe that it's okay to pass a law and ignore it. Do you know that these bills we're even discussing now, that some people are not happy? It was at the National Assembly for 9 months. Did they not see it at the time? Now that people realize that government is interested in enforcing the law, people are bringing up the issue. So in a way, it's good. But what we are saying now is we want to issue guidelines, we're almost done with it, to try and help, in a way, remove the exposure that everybody had from 1st of January 2022 to 31st of December 2025, and make it very clear that from 1st of January 2026, for new securities, note that the tax is there. Do your calculations very well. It's a pricing thing. Egypt has a 20% withholding tax on treasury bills and homo bills. They have more FPIs than Nigeria. Nigeria has 10%, they are not implementing it. They say heaven will come down. So why is it that we present ourselves to the rest of the world as a country that is lawless, where we can have laws and then ignore them? That doesn't help us. It doesn't help our image. So our approach is implement the law as it is, but ensure that you address the concerns of investors, reduce the uncertainty, and then once there's stability and they see growth in the horizon, investment will come your direction. Thank you.
Okay. I think we still have a couple of minutes. Wow. So, Mr. Olushoga, I want to ask you a question.
I'd like to respond to the
Okay.
pension question. Okay, so your question, asking whether for lack of opportunities or out of quality. Okay, so the truth is, it's for lack of opportunities up till now. So with the new expanded investment guidelines and the introduction of other asset classes, alternative asset classes and all, so we're going to see more asset classes to invest in. Thank you.
Okay, just to Mr. Idele, just a quick question. For capital market operators that are in the room, those of us who are market makers, this is your tax. At what point do we get charged? Because our job is to provide liquidity. So if I buy a T-bill this morning and I sold that same T-bill the same day, does it apply? And sometimes we're not buying because we want to buy it. We are buying it because we are liquidity providers. So are we exempt because that is not, we're not doing it because we just want to hold it. We're doing it because we're providing a service, and liquidity is critical for the capital markets to operate. Now, having said that, we believe that at the end of the day, we still get charged CIT. So I think that capital market operators should actually be exempt from this tax on T-bills and CGT, just simply because of the role and the function, because if we don't do it because of that and the complexities of that, I think that it may be a disservice to the country. I think that that's one. So maybe some further thought needs to be given to that. That's number one. Number two is the multiplicity of it, like economic drivers, in the sense that a capital market operator is serving the end user, which is the consumer. He goes and he buys it from a bank. The bank probably bought it in the primary market. We then buy it in the secondary market. We then give it on to the customer. Now, at different points in that cycle, you could argue that it's economic activity, they're independent transactions, and so we must pay. But then the question is, how does that reflect on the end user? So I think that those are some of the things that we need some level of clarity in terms of how these things are actually remitted. And the challenge is also that on the end consumer, you know, the states too have woken up. So someone could buy a T-bill from me in Lagos, but the person is domiciled in, let's say, Abuja, for example. Now, as a corporate organization, we pay our taxes to FIRS. The consumer pays it to Abuja, yeah. And then you then have the issue around the fact that a lot of Nigerians today, we have BVNs, but not a lot of people, if you ask them, do you know what your TIN number is, or your tax number? A lot of people don't know it, and I don't know whether we have a database that is linking all of that stuff today that capital market operators can access, that is linked to the BVN, so that we don't need to be asking them, because a lot of people don't understand it. And when you say, oh, it's so that we can remit your tax, they're like, what? Who sent you message? You know? So I think that some of these things are also important for us operators. So I know that they're not policy questions, but they're operational questions, and I think it's important that we understand that. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those excellent questions. So on the first one about market makers, you know, I think you should actually be like one of the happiest people in the room for two reasons. Number one is the exemption we are providing for the big investors, over 150 million a year, is premised on reinvestment. What it actually means is I can decide I will never pay capital gains tax, and I'll rather just reinvest and pay the transaction fees. So what you see is more transactions, right? You don't make money from transactions?
No. The reason why I don't entirely agree with you is because you are also confronted with the fact that whilst you may not be paying the tax on capital gains, the challenge with that is that even though the market could still dip in future, at year end, the taxman is going to say, whilst you may not have crystallized that gain, right, I will still have to pay capital, what's it called, corporate tax on minimum on that money. So I'm not better off because I don't know. It's now like I'm in the realm of unknowns because at that point I would pay because I still own the security and say you've made a profit. Now next year comes and then it tanks. I can't get that much. So whilst it was not hurting me on CGT, it can still hurt me. And so it's striking that balance. So sometimes you then see people taking the view of, okay, you know what I will do? Let me quickly sell it to a friendly, right, to crystallize. Like you start thinking about how do you crystallize this thing to know that it is real and then come back. And so you saying to me that, oh, I can just reinvest. It's not particularly solving my problem because whilst it may not be going on CGT, I'm going to give it up on CIT. So that's the issue.
Yeah, no, I can explain because I see where you're coming from, right? So you won't be taxed on unrealized gains.
Fantastic.
So it's
That's
only
good news.
realized, so you are not taxed on that. So which means when you realize it, you decide what to do with it. If you want to rebalance your portfolio and you sell stocks and you buy fixed income investment, you still don't pay the tax until if you don't come back to the market within the same year of assessment. So this, because your investment is, you're not one-off investor, and pension funds, mutual funds are all exempted, right? So there'll be more transactions, so I insist that you make more money. and then the exemptions also mean that you have more retail investors that don't have to worry about anything, including reinvestment. So you see, because you even pay CIT, this is fantastic for you because it has not even increased your tax cost in any way and is bringing more revenue in your direction. What happens in terms of, the multiple stages? I like that question you asked because we actually spent almost an hour in my committee. We had a retreat last week, and this was one of the discussions because we're looking for what is the best way to implement the withholding tax, for example, on fixed income securities without creating problems. And the easiest one was to say, at the time you issue it, take the tax on the interest, and then it reflects in the pricing for whatever you're doing in the secondary market. But then, like you rightly pointed out, most of the guys who do primary are corporate. So that tax goes to the federal. Some of the guys who will do secondary are individuals. They're supposed to pay the tax to the state. You're going to have a problem with the sub-national. So one of the things we want to do now is get input from you guys who play in this market about what's the best approach. We're also looking at other countries. Egypt seems to have figured it out. Everything is automated. And once we are done with all of that, we go to NEC and go and sit down in front of the principalities and powers. That's what I call the governors now. And explain to them why we're doing it, what it means for them, and get their buy-in before we implement. And all of this we want to do before January next year. So you can see why we're working literally around the clock, but we'll figure it out.
Thank you very much.
So the reforms are in transition, the reforms are work in progress, and their transmission to the lives of everyday Nigerian is being tracked, and things are in the works. I'm actually very confident about the fact that Nigeria has risen, not shall rise again. At this point, based on the program we have, we're supposed to stop at 12:55. I don't know what that time is showing, but it's just almost 12:55. So we're actually not doing badly at all, because if the lizard falls from tree and nobody prays it, does like this, that means he's happy with himself. So right now, I think we've done very well to ourselves. So I'd like to thank the panelists for, the insightful contributions. If we stay, the way I'm seeing the energy level here, we can't leave here today. So let us, I think one of the things that will also be helpful is, because people are so interested, perhaps, from an M&E perspective, we can harvest their questions, and if we have their contacts, for someone in Parthian Partners to truly take them up and escalate it to the people to get the answers. From there, you may even get customers. I'm a money man, so I always follow the money. So thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to thank you all for your insightful contributions. I'd like to thank you for the learnings, because some of us, as we're doing this, we're also learning from it. And then to thank everyone here for your patience and for, everywhere is so quiet. People don't want to leave, but we have to leave. So I'm sorry. So thank you very much. It's come to the end of this panel session. Thank you.
pictures with the directors. Yeah, can we give a round of applause to our panelists again? That was a very fantastic session. Now it's time to celebrate excellence in the room, and we'll call on Mr. Adedotun Sulaiman to present the awards to the panelists and moderators. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. To give the closing remarks, I'll be calling on our group CFO, Mr. Yinka Arawa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Parthian Group and management of the Parthian Group, I want to say, I want to express our profound gratitude to our esteemed speaker, keynote speaker, Dr. Bismarck Rewani. A round of applause for him, even though he's absent now. Our reputable panelists and moderator, a round of applause for them too. And for you, our distinguished guests, a round of applause for yourselves. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for participating. And we hope that 2026 will indeed be one of a shared prosperity for us all. Thank you, everyone. God bless you.